Good one. No. It's on the side all the way up to the top.
Your mic is on.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going. I'm going. Oh, yeah.
You got it?
No.
P capital legislature. lot of people getting on. Where's the teacher?
Okay, 8 o'clock aquí.
Kai Kai? Kai Kai, 8 o'clock ka?
Kaya.
Kai Kai. Shabiha? How come this one's going to, love for me?
You're already in?
Yeah.
Let me call her.
Call for day 1-to-1 community.
Their
On this chat, put everyone's name that's here right now. But then when you're done,
Oh,
it's gonna go to the chat. They're gonna have a blue link, and you need to type in everyone. But it's gonna ask you for the email, their names. Yeah, because this is another. It's a different workshop. Okay. But print everybody's name first. Yeah, sure. Tuesday now. Faye, right? Your name? Oh. Oh. Maria. Is it Gillan? No A?
yeah. Buenas. Ukuru.
Aaron and hello. Jake. Hello. No, Jake's out. Jake's out. Aaron and Renisha. Renisha's out. Renisha's out. Oh no, she just said to type everyone. No, don't type those things that are not here. Oh, it says good morning. Oh, they're from Leone. Oh, it's from Leone. Even Miss Lisa? Yeah, she's in. Yeah, I saw her. Oh, so I gotta type.
Good morning,
Oh.
everyone. I know you're typing your names. That's
What the heck?
great. Just make sure you also put it on the chat. But I do have the link, and I'll keep posting it throughout the session. But be sure that you click on the link so that way you can sign in for the division. Okay. Thank you.
Ryan Gumatata. No, 27. Oh, something. She said something. Where did they put the bags that were on the table?
Omar.
Yes, Rosemary.
Are you on mute? No, you're not. Your thing is on. Someone's mic is on.
Cafeteria?
Library.
No, yeah.
I tried to drag it. Don't just have.
No, but it's.
You have to brave it, and I don't want to break it.
Where's your earphones? Can I borrow? I don't have earphones. Yeah.
Tiara.
What earphones are talking about? My pilot?
Never mind.
You found it? Make me.
Oh, turn it on.
Pareho ba tayo? Ano ba tayo? Ito yan. Wow, there's only 162.
Girls. I'm champ.
Huh? Stop.
Thank you. 7, 8.
Vince.
We didn't touch it.
Or the last.
Vince. School bus.
I get the top one.
I'm sorry. Turn off your mic, guys.
School bus, Vince.
Can you? Yeah.
Vince.
Oh, you take out that boil, right? Yeah, take out the boil.
Then has 10.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh, there's a lot of them here. Your mic, don't have your microphone.
Oh.
Maybe I need to adjust my.
Is there a machine?
Yeah, it does.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We'll get started. Dr. Colade, you're on. Are you with us?
I am. Good morning. It's
Good
great to
morning.
be here.
Okay, we'll get started. I know there's still quite a few who are logging on, so as they log on.
Good morning.
Then to get started. Good morning. So this is our day 2 of our assistive technology workshop with Dr. Gretchen Colade, and today Dr. Colade will be covering gathering information and trialing. So you'll learn more about how to gather data that you would probably need to collect if your student is using assistive technology. So
I know.
Are you ready for me to
Okay.
start?
All righty.
Good morning, Ryan. Maybe Leah, if you can help by muting everyone so that way everybody can hear me clearly.
Good morning,
And
Dr.
yes,
Gretchen.
Trisha, or everybody mute your own mics. That would be great too. Please, everyone, the one thing that I've seen in our Zoom or in our chat messages is Trisha is saying, please make sure to sign in at the link so that you get credit for attending today. And then also make sure you sign in at your school site. You know, there's nothing more frustrating than forgetting to and then having to try to figure out how you can catch up. And so please do that. The meeting's being recorded, so that way if you have someone that you think should watch later, please do so. Any other reminders, Leah?
If we have any questions or comments, please place them on the chat window. Attendees are encouraged to share their comments. Comments will be addressed at intervals at the end of the webinar, or maybe in between your presentation, Dr. Colade. And so due to background noise, can I request that everyone mute their microphones? Okay, that's it.
All right, very good. Then we'll get started. The first thing I want to share with you all is a thought I had today. As I shared with you all about my brother, Michael. Michael and I talk every single day. And again, he lives in a group home in Washington, D.C. I live out here in Oklahoma. And so he calls me. He goes to a day program, which I'm so glad he does. There's real dignity in having somewhere to go every day when you're an adult. I know we all love our days off. However, there's dignity in being able to get dressed and get out the door. And so Michael got home and called me about a half an hour ago. And what I want to share with you all is just a thought. Michael and I have the same conversation every day. And I know you all probably work with individuals with disabilities who will ask you the same question again and again and again. And what I hope for all of you, and especially for your students, is that you will continue to answer them, even if it's in a way that is different or a little bit funny, but to never get frustrated with them. Because realize that anytime somebody asks you a question, really what they're saying to you is, I want to talk with you. I want to have a conversation, and I might be limited in what I can ask. Do you see what I'm saying? And so to be able to number one, there's a fabulous article that I'll make a note and I'll send to Michelle and to Leah. It's called Patience versus Understanding. And when we work with people with disabilities, I bet a lot of you all whenever you tell someone what you do for your profession, that they will say to you, oh, you must be so patient. And to be very honest, I am probably one of the least patient people you have ever met. Ask my husband. However, if you have understanding of what the students' abilities are, what they can do, what they need support with, you don't run out of patience. All right. I rarely run out of patience with my brother. What I do is I understand that he's still, I think I shared with you all that he is, we've identified that he's moving group homes, but the group home that he's going to is not open yet. It's not staffed. He still asks me every day, have I talked to the lady about the group home, the new group home? And I will say, Michael, I give him a countdown. Right now we're at 1 week. And 1 week from now, I will text the lady because I don't want to make her crazy. But so I thought, I really wanted to share that with you all, that it's really important that if you have a student that keeps asking you the same question, please use understanding of the fact that what they're really saying is they want to talk to you. So, all right, so let's jump into tonight's session. And tonight's session, we're going to talk about how we bring assistive technology into the lives of our students. And there are several steps that we use. Again, first, I have no financial relationship with anything. I'm going to show you all some forms. You all have access to these forms. You can use them. I'm not being paid to give them to you. And the best part is they're free and they're on the web, so that if for some reason you can't find it after this workshop, go back to the PowerPoint, find the name of it, and then you can Google it and find it online. So our question for tonight is, how can assistive technology support all students with a disability? All right. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to consider. We need to have consideration of assistive technology. And first, let me say, my plan for tonight is we're going to go through the consideration of assistive technology. And then what we're going to do is, if I'm hoping we have time, and even if we don't, I'm going to give you all some time at the end to write in. Remember, at the end of yesterday, I asked you all to think about, questions or concerns that you have that you'd kind of like me to maybe bat around some ideas for. And so I'll open that up towards the end of tonight. All right. All right, so for consideration of assistive technology, what I first want to tell you about is this, and this makes me crazy that I didn't know about this until I actually left the classroom. What we need to understand, remember how yesterday I said assistive technology isn't just a good idea, it's the law? Well, not only is it the law, there are guidelines, there are quality indicators that tell us this is best practice. And I think a lot of times whenever we're in an educational setting, sometimes when we suggest assistive technology, people think, oh, that's just something extra we could do. And we really don't know how to do it. That's not true any longer. We now have what is called the QUIET, or the quality indicators for assistive technology. And if you take a look at the screen, tonight we're going to look at consideration of assistive technology needs. We're then going to, in the next 2 nights, we're going to look at assessment and how you can help with that. First, we're going to look tonight at how you can help with consideration. Then we're going to look at how you can support the IEP team in assessment. And then we're going to look at how we can implement it and how it is in the IEP. There are other parts, certainly with 5, the evaluation of the effectiveness. You will certainly be part of that as well, because your teachers, your special ed teachers are going to rely on you to tell them, how did the student do? And so we'll talk about documentation for the progress that the student's making, or maybe they don't make progress. Number 6 is assistive technology in transition. And this is something that needs to be considered by the IEP team when a student moves to a different educational setting. Now, most of the time in special education, for some bizarre reason, when we say transition, we go to the end of their high school years and when they're transitioning out into post school life, whether it's work or living situations or whatever. Transition, though, can also mean, and it is just as important, can also mean transitioning from elementary school to middle school, elementary school to junior high school, junior high or middle school to high school. It can even refer to in between the grades if they're switching teachers, right? Now the question then becomes, do you all wonderful people as the one-on-one paras, do you get to move with the student or not? There are pros and cons to both. And it truly, I hope you all are involved in that decision. Certainly parents are very involved in that decision. One of the best things that I ever had, one of my favorite stories about a para educator who came from the middle school. Remember, I taught in the high school for 15 years. Had a brand new student coming in, first day of school, coming through my door. And I would greet, my absolute commitment was I was at the door of my classroom and I greeted my students as they walked in the door. Again, my students were high schoolers, and so I would shake their hand. If they didn't have shaking hand behavior, we would figure it out. If they were tactily defensive, we would figure out a different way that we could greet each other. But I wanted to teach my students one-on-one how to greet someone at the door of a classroom. It meant a lot to me, and it taught them great social skills. So in first day of school, my students that have been with my program, for a year or two before, know what they need to do. In walks, let's call this student John. In walks John. Now John has autism, and whenever John is walking, John is making a car noise. Okay, I don't know if you have kiddos who make car noises, but he would do the as he's coming through my door. And so I stopped him, I put my hand out and stopped him at kind of the chest level. And I said, "Hi, John, my name's Mrs. Lade. It's nice to meet you." No eye contact, pushed through my hand, kept making the car noises, sat down quietly. What was fabulous was in walks this incredible para educator that I needed in my life at that moment. She had transitioned with John and other students from the middle school to the high school that year. And she looked at me and said, "John has autism. You're going to have to teach him that systematically. He doesn't know what you want him to do right now." What a fabulous piece of information to share. So do you see where transition is not just they're leaving school and going out into post-high school life. Transitions, you all can help with transitions. If they're using assistive technology, we absolutely have to consider making sure that the receiving setting gets the same training and knowledge that the sending setting does. Number 7 for quality indicators is administrative support. This is where I was so pleased with Michelle and Leia's last set of workshops. They invited and we had many administrators attend. Administrators need to know about assistive technology. Now, I'll also tell you, I can't even imagine how big their plate is and how much they have to know. However, assistive technology is a part of what they need to have on their plate. And then finally, 8, guess what, everyone? You all are meeting the choir tonight because we are all participating in an assistive technology professional development. And so we are meeting that quality indicator with this series of workshops. But for tonight, we're going to look specifically at consideration. So, okay, this is where I'm going to challenge you all on the chat. Let's take a moment and think about what the word consider means. When you consider something, what does it mean you're actually doing? So I'm going to turn up my chat. And so please take a minute and toss in the chat. What does it mean to consider something? You think carefully about something. Excellent. Giving it some thought. Absolutely, Joanne. Absolutely. What else do you think? Suggestions. Oh my gosh, yes. Giving it a chance to think of someone else's thought and not your own. Sheena. Thank you. That's perfect. To think carefully about something. Alyssa, absolutely. What else do y'all think? These are all fabulous answers. Thank you. Thank you. Being open, IB, I absolutely agree. When you consider something, you have got to be open to other ideas. Anything else? Taking it into account, trying something new. Oh my God, absolutely. Rethinking, Elizabeth, that is so important. Imagination to assess and appraise. Flexibility, absolutely. Analyzing it, absolutely. You all have great answers. To contemplate, floor, absolutely. To contemplate it and to think on it for a while. So to think about it carefully, to reframe the situation, absolutely. To think about it, absolutely. Thinking carefully for someone, yes, because that's what I'm asking you to do. Look attentively at regard, having a specified quality, thinking carefully about something before making a decision, have an open understanding. Yay, think through all the aspects. You all are fabulous. Francis, to be empathetic, to put ourselves in their positions. Don't be ashamed to ask if you don't understand. Absolutely. Consider your actions and giving the job some thoughts to think about. You're right. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to do a couple of other things. Hang on just a sec. This is where it's going to get fun. First of all, the actual, Rosemary, thank you. Rosemary, thank you. Taking everything into account before making a decision. The actual Webster's Dictionary definition says to think about carefully. You all nailed it. Actually, to be honest, April, I agree. Awesome answers, everyone. You guys are a fabulous group. I wish I could clone you and take you to other workshops with me. What we need to understand, you know, I think we all need to write Webster's and give them the Guam school State Department of Ed definition of it, because you all expanded it so much more beautifully. Okay, so now this is where it's going to get kind of fun. I'm going to ask you to think again. All right, everybody ready? What do you consider on a regular basis in your life? What do you consider? Okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be school. It can certainly be school, but what do you consider? What do you think about carefully? Coffee, I love it, absolutely. You all are in the morning. Coffee is absolutely one. Situation and thoughts, how people truly feel, to be kind, relocating people's feelings, absolutely. Waking up to a great day, needs and wants, time, absolutely. I love the Lillian waking up to a good day, dedication, actions and how it's going to affect the rest of my day. What I'm going to do, greeting everyone. Yes, breakfast, absolutely. Safety, medications. Oh, Rosemary, absolutely. We all have our little medication routines, especially me as I'm getting older and having more medications added. Planning for the day, Omar. How my day is going to be like, how to get through the day. Absolutely. Remember to sign in. That's what you should absolutely be considering. Students' emotions and how the student feels in the morning. Oh my gosh, that's so important. Greeting people, what to wear. Yes, making choices, relocating, refresh, thinking outside and writing notes. My attitude towards everyone. Absolutely. What kind of parts I'm going to put in my truck. That's a good thing to consider. How's my day? Hygiene, absolutely. Leaving problems at the door before entering the building. I'm so glad you consider that. What's for lunch? Can't you consider happy campers? Absolutely. What will I expect from my student today, or how will their day be? Absolutely. Who's going to get off the bus? Waking up refreshed. Maggie, I hope that you do. Absolutely. And so can you see where what I've asked you to do is that you're looking at yourself and thinking, how are you considering things for you. Be kind to everyone at work and help if you can. Absolutely. Now I'm going to ask you to switch gears. Think about the day. What's the weather going to be like, and what can I do if it's not ideal for what I originally planned? We hate those rain days. How my actions and words will affect everyone, to think positive. Routine activities. Oh, Kathy, family. Oh my goodness, absolutely we do. So all right, now I'm going to ask you. Now we're going to switch. I'm going to ask you, the question before was, what do you consider? Now the question is, what are the outside influences that are considered for you? What is considered for you, for your day, that you have no control over? What is considered for you? April, I agree to smile. Oh, work, absolutely. Cleaning, Ryan, absolutely. Training, Rosemary. My thoughts and feelings, your routine, your cleaning, certainly. Others' emotions, your work schedule, Francis, you're right, we're not in charge of it. To eat breakfast and to drink coffee. Cooking, Ryan, oh yes, you know, what my boss wants me to do for the day, bills, effort, training, the agenda for the day. Oh, an injury, I'm sorry. Eating, your daily tasks, what's on, oh, your next move. Adulting, oh, I know, wouldn't we love to give up adulting? Students' behavior sometimes is something that is considered outside. Your coworkers, work vibes, things that have been put off before due to outside. Everything to do in life, parenting, yes, my family and my job. Applying training for every given situation, to learn some beneficial things. Driving early to go to work because of traffic, absolutely. Responsibility for parents and helping. Bless your heart, Maria. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Everything around us, making sure that our girl has clothes, waking up for another day and setting that alarm depending on what time you have to get at. Family and family needs, your dedication to your assigned task, making sure you get to work on time, absolutely. These are all things that are considered for us. Feelings towards your colleagues, yes, hopefully they're good, but sometimes they can be really challenging. So what I want you to think about with what we've just done is this. There is a difference between what you can consider for yourself and what is being considered for you from outside of you. Your students are going to rely on you to consider things for them. And it is such an important job to do. And I agree, to put the best smile on and come to work. So let's talk about assistive technology and how we can consider it. First, let's talk about what the definition is. Yesterday, I went through and I showed you a whole bunch of devices. And the actual definition, this is literally straight out of the federal law. An assistive technology device is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether it's acquired commercially, we order it and we buy it off the shelf, whether it's something you have and you modify it, or it's customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. Now, in your case, most of your assistive technology will be focused on academics. So when we say functional capabilities, I want you to also think academic capabilities, all right? However, remember how yesterday we looked at some daily living devices that can help a student be more independent in daily living activities. And so an assistive technology device is any item, that's the device. Realize that GSAT and any Assistive Tech Act program is mandated to provide you access to borrowing devices and giving you information about them, okay? But that's not where their job ends. Their job continues because then they must provide assistive technology service. And what service includes is any help or training provided to an evaluator, a person with a disability, a family member, a caregiver, or a service provider to select or to use an assistive technology device. You all fall under service providers. You all can borrow directly from GSAT If you would like to, you can ask your teacher. Sometimes, you know, everybody is busy. And again, remember how I said administrators have such a big plate. And sometimes teachers have a big plate. And that's where you can play. Remember how yesterday I talked about determining what your role is. To say to your teacher, hey, you know what? I attended this assistive tech workshop, and I think there might be something out there to help John be able to write more easily so that way he can get his work done and not get so frustrated. Is it okay with you if I write to GSAT and borrow a device, have it sent to the school, and let's try it for 30 days to see if it'll help him? And hopefully they'll be really open to that. To be honest, what I've always learned in life is that if you volunteer to do the work for someone to bring in something to help support a student, rarely will someone say no. All right, and so that's what services are. Services are you call up GSAT or you email them and say, I have a student who's struggling with writing. These are his or her particular challenges. What would you recommend? They have people who work for them on staff that can then kind of kick around some ideas for you, or you can actually go on and look in their inventory and look up. Today, I think I shared with you all yesterday that I am taking steps to become the vision person in at Oklahoma Able Tech. And I spent about 3 hours today going through assistive tech devices to determine what we need to add to our inventory. And I was just amazed at some of the fabulous things that I found. And that's what I would encourage you to do, is to look into what they have, what GSAT has in their inventory, and then contact them and say, do you think this would be something that would be a good thing to try? And then they will, if it is something that requires training, they'll help train you on how to use it. You know, they'll also help brainstorm up ideas. And so lots and lots of ideas there for service. So realize that GSAT is charged with supporting you by loaning devices to you, but also giving you information about the devices and giving you training for them. And what I really appreciate about this is you all are being tasked with supporting a student with multiple needs. And sometimes you don't know what is out there. And the best part is you don't have to be an expert on it. There are people that help you. And that's one of the things I love about. And do you see where, when we go back to the quiet, the 8 indicators for the quiet, that professional development is one of them, that we can't just sit back and go, I don't know. And I don't even know what I don't know. Well, now you all do know that there's an organization out there that you can contact, that you, as the paraeducator, have the right to be able to do. Now, and one of the things that I did want to bring up too, because yesterday we talked about your role and how you need that I am encouraging you to ask your special ed teacher to share with you the goals and objectives that the student is working on. And the reason for that, I thought after our session, that I didn't emphasize the why you have the right to access it. Realize that there is a federal act called the FERPA, and FERPA refers to basically confidentiality of school records. All right, and bottom line, what it comes down to is, it comes down to the phrase, need to know. Do you need to know about the goals and objectives for a student with a disability? And I'll give you an example. I used to supervise student teachers, and I was in a school once, and I was waiting at my student's door, at their classroom door. The students were out at a special like music or PE, and I was waiting for them to come back so I could go in and observe my student teacher. And down the hallway comes a parent who's bringing a student in late to school, and the student, just by how she was walking and how she was interacting with the mother, I could tell that this student had some developmental delays. I, as the student teaching supervisor, have no need to know what that child's goals or objectives are. I don't need to know anything about them because I'm not the child's teacher. I'm not the child's paraeducator, right? So if I were to ask anyone, the teacher, the special ed teacher, the paraeducator, that would be where I hope that I would be told, you know, that's confidential information and you'll have to ask the parent for permission for me to share it with you. However, as the paraeducator, you are working with the student. You have a need to know, all right? So you fall well under the confidentiality FERPA regulation that says only people who need to know need to have access to the goals and objectives. So please know that now, and I'm hoping, again, I think it comes down to how you approach the teacher, that to not go in it, you know, saying, hey, I have a right to do this, but instead saying, I understand FERPA and I know that I fall under the regulation of need to know. And so may I please have, may I either please see a copy or have a copy of the parts of the IEP that I'm responsible for. All right, because on the IEP, it's listed who's going to be responsible for making sure these goals and objectives occur. All right, so what's a promising practice in assistive technology when we talk about consideration? Okay, everyone, I wish if you have a hard copy of this document right now, I want you to circle this. I want you to highlight it. I want you to put stars on it. If I could have you put LED lights around it, I would do that. All right, this is the most important thing I want you to take away from tonight's session. Okay, are you ready? Assistive technology is considered for all children with disabilities and the unique needs of the child. Unfortunately, what occurs is that in special ed, we tend to only think about assistive technology for students who have the more severe delays and disabilities. That is not absolutely best practice. Best practice is we consider it. Now let's go back to what you all shared. We think about it carefully. We're open, we have flexibility, we have empathy, we put ourselves in the students' shoes to look at what are they struggling with. And so you all are in charge of your one-on-ones. Almost everybody yesterday said that you're a one-on-one. That doesn't mean that you're not also asked to work with other students sometimes. Please be thinking and considering at all times, would this student benefit from something that would help them be able to, remember how yesterday I showed you the writing example where it had the grid so that the student could stay within the lines and not be writing all over the paper? Is that something that you see that maybe a student would need? Lots and lots of different AT can be considered. However, the most important thing, again, circle, star, put LED lights around this. Every single student with a disability must be considered for assistive technology. All right, and sometimes it's really easy on the IEP, that's just one line on the IEP. It's really easy to check no and move on. All right, I hope that after these 5 nights with me, or 5 mornings with me, nights for me, mornings for you all, that you will feel more confident in asking the teacher if you see that a student has a potential need. Because what we're saying when we say consider is, remember how whenever you all gave me all of the different what you thought consideration was defined as, not one of you said make a firm decision. Not one of you said that. You all said think about it carefully, be flexible, be open-minded. We didn't say consider yes. We never said that. Consideration is saying, I wonder if they do. And if when you say, I wonder if they do, then the answer is yes, we need to consider assistive technology and let's do some things to trial it. Okay, tomorrow we're going to talk about trialing. Tonight we're just going to do consideration. So let's talk about some hard questions that you need to be part of the answer to, because for each one of these, you all are intimately involved. You are the people that if I were your cooperating teacher, I would be coming to say, please answer these 4 questions for me. Okay, so let's go through them and talk through them clearly. And I want you to think, for those of you who know your student that you're going to be working with this next year, I want you to be thinking about how you would answer these questions. You don't have to answer them because I don't want to break any confidentiality. I don't need to know. But I do want you to be thinking about it. First one, what task is it that we want the student to do that she or he is unable to do at a level that reflects his or her abilities? Writing, reading, communicating, hearing, seeing. What do we want them to do that because of their disability, they're unable to do at a level that reflects his or her abilities? And I'm going to give you an example. You know, the nice part about Michelle and Leah asking me to talk about assistive technology is I've got lots of examples. I had a student, let's call him, oh golly, Michael. Let's call him my brother. Let's call him Michael. Michael came to me as a high schooler, and I taught 3 subject areas. I taught art, math, and English. And so in English, we would do journaling every day. We would have some type of journaling activity. And the students all, depending on their abilities, realized that in my classroom, I averaged between 17 and 22 students in my classroom. Or in my group. We divided them into 2 groups. So I never had 17 or 22 in the room at one time, except waiting for lunch to be finished. And that was, okay, it was never unstructured time, but it was less structured time. But for teaching, we had them in 2 separate groups. So I had anywhere between 8 and 11 students at one time. And again, as I shared with you all yesterday, I had between 4 and 6 paraeducators in my classroom helping me. That's the level of need my students had. So in comes Michael. And I had, you know, the composition books where you can't, okay, you can rip the pages out, but not easily, and you can see that they've been ripped out. My main thing with a composition book for my students who could actually put pencil to paper is I wanted to see progress through the year. And the composition book held the progress, you know, from the very first day all the way to the end. And so to answer this question for Michael, you know, I wanted him to write, but what am I asking him to do that he's unable to do at a level that reflects his or his abilities? And basically what I wanted my students to write each day, I wanted them to write the date. I wanted them to write, I always asked a feeling question, how are you today? And then they would, you know, and they were given different options for how they were feeling. Kind of like, remember how when you said for consideration, what do you consider? How are your kiddos? Oh my gosh, you're right. Who's getting off the bus today? You know, is it going to be a student who had a good night's sleep and who had a good breakfast at home? Or is it going to be a student who left a home that was in chaos all night long and who is exhausted? And so in Michael's case, Michael could verbally tell me, this Michael could verbally tell me the date. He could tell me his name. He could tell me, and I would also ask them to write down their address. One of my biggest challenges that I brought to my classroom, remember how I told you yesterday that I kind of carry my mom on my shoulder, is that I never want to lose my brother. And I want him to always be able to identify himself. I wanted that for my students too. So if they could write, they would write out their address and then they would read it back to their paraeducator every single day. Now, big challenge if you have students who move frequently. You might need to make a decision about how you are going to deal with that. In another student's case, my student John, my student with autism that, you know, sounded like a car, when he came in the door, you know, the paraeducator shared with me that he moved quite frequently because of family issues with eviction. And so what I did is I had him, I got permission from his mother. I explained the situation, explained the English goal to the mother, and we agreed that he would learn his grandmother's address. His grandmother did not move. And so he would learn his grandmother's address. At any rate, okay, let me come back. So in Michael's case, in my student's case, oh my gosh, I can't even imitate how he would hold the pencil. I mean, it was the most painful grip you have ever seen in your whole life. And his hand would hurt. He would stop and he would massage his hand. He would ask for, I always had cold water in my classroom because we're Oklahoma and it was hot. It was August, beginning of the school year. He would ask to hold a bottle of cold water to help relax his hand and because it was sweating and hot. And okay, his writing, what I was asking him to do was not showing the level of his ability because he was spending way more time trying to write just the date when he could have gotten through it all. So what I ended up doing is I contacted Oklahoma Able Tech. Way back then, I was even involved with Oklahoma Able Tech. And I said, what do you have for me? And what they sent me was, and I'll remember what it is probably in the middle of tonight and I'll tell you tomorrow, but it was basically a word processor that would hook up to my printer. So what I liked about it was that if I put him on the computer, I don't know if you all have kids that do this, but he would jump off and like go on games because my computer had lots of different things on it. My desktop did. I had 3 desktop computers in my classroom in a computer center. So the word processor kept him on topic because it didn't go anywhere else except just type in his information. You know what? That was the beauty. He was able to, with assistive technology, reflect his true abilities in writing out and journaling. He would then go over, I taught him how to plug it into the printer. Okay, remember I left the classroom 11 years ago. So this was before wireless. Or if wireless did exist, I didn't know how to use it. So, and none of my young paras, I love you. I love all paras, but boy, my young paras, those were the ones that I would depend on for technology. But so at any rate, do you see where for number 1, what is the task we're asking them to do? And is it really reflecting their abilities? You all, by just virtue of knowing your students, know this answer, all right? Okay, so the second question is the student currently able to complete tasks with special strategies or accommodations? All right, so let's talk about accommodations for a minute. When you hear the word accommodations in special education, I want you to think of the very first 3 letters of that word, ACC, and I want you to think access. An accommodation is merely access to the task that they have to do. So can assistive technology be part of accommodations? Absolutely, it can be. Absolutely. And in fact, it usually is. However, too, accommodations can also be something you offer to the whole class, right? One of the things that I did in my classroom is through Oklahoma Able Tech, they helped me find the largest digital clock I could find and posted in my classroom because I wanted my students who could read numbers to be able to read what time it was. And then off to the side, we put what were the important times. In my classroom, I wanted my students to clean up before we would transition. When the bell would ring, remember how I said we had 2 groups, I would switch groups. Well, this was even back before, oh goodness, COVID. We would clean all the table surfaces. I don't know about your students, but my students were, they shared a lot of germs. And so I wanted tables cleaned at the end of every class period. But that took time, and I didn't want my para-educators being the only ones to do it. I didn't want me to be the only ones to do it. Certainly, my students, I wanted them to do it. Some of them couldn't do it independently, but they could do it with support from the adults. And so we were able to help them be able to do it. And so the clock was an accommodation for everyone to say, If the bell was going to ring at 10 o'clock in the morning, I would then put off to the side cleanup at 9:52. Okay, so that way, that was an accommodation for everyone, not just for one student. Do you see what I'm saying? So the question then becomes, is the student currently able to complete their task with either special strategies or accommodations? Number 3, is there currently assistive technology, either devices, tools, hardware, or software? Software that's either already on the computer or somewhere that we can gain access and download it onto the computer that is used to address this task. Do you see where the question 3 is the question where you go to GSAT and you say, what's currently available to help a student with? That's what I did with my student with the writing issue. And to be very honest, where we started was not with the word processor. We trialed, oh my gosh, there are all kinds of writing, and today we're going to do our make it and take it is the weighted pencil. There are all kinds of assistive technology devices out there to help support physically writing. But what ended up happening is we trialed, didn't work, trialed, didn't work, trialed, did. Probably by the third one, all of us were ready to just say, this isn't working. And so then that's where, when I was working with the person at Oklahoma Able Tech, they then finally said, hey, what do you think about a word processor? How is he on the computer? Well, actually, she said, you know, how is he on the computer? There are a lot of keyboards that are adaptive keyboards. Okay, so her question for me was, do you think an adaptive keyboard would work? And, you know, my statement was, this student was, again, going back to reflecting this student's abilities, he knew how to get into games. He knew how to get, our school wouldn't allow, like they blocked any YouTube videos. He knew how to bypass that. He would get on YouTube videos and then I'd get a nasty note from that IT person. Although I always baked IT people cookies because I think it's really important to take good care of the people who take care of you. And so, so the question then became how, you know, what's the best thing for him? And it ended up being a word processor. All right, and then number 4, would the use of assistive technology help the student perform this skill more easily or efficiently in the least restrictive environment, or perform successfully with less personal assistance? A key that, remember how last night I talked with you all about the word barrier? We never want you to be a barrier to the student being as independent as they possibly can. And I'll give you an example. I had a student, a female student, I'll call her Lynn. Lynn, her mother would bring her to school every day because she didn't trust the bus. And she would walk her in and she'd walk her to my door, and the mother wanted to come in my room and help Lynn get her coat off, get her backpack off. She would unzip her backpack for Lynn. She would I always had a folder that would go home with every student because sometimes they would put stuff in their backpacks that, you know, was just work that wasn't important, or art that they made that, you know, wasn't important. I had a folder that was we called it the teacher folder, and this teacher folder held important notes in it. And so parents were told to check that every day. Now, you know, I know we all have those parents who don't. No judgment. Then I figure out other ways to communicate with parents. But so this mother, Lynn's mother, would come in, open up her backpack, take her folder out, and hand it to me. And I'm like, you are not teaching the student to be independent. And so all of my students had lockers. We were high schoolers. High schoolers have lockers. Lynn could not. Visually, she couldn't process those, you know, lockers are tiny. And to get her coat in and to get her backpack in, that was not, she was not able to perform that skill. It wasn't going to happen without a ton of personal assistance. And Lynn had a fabulous pair. Her name is Kathy. And Kathy was just, she still is one of my best, all of my pairs, all of my former pairs are still some of my best friends. And so Kathy and I had a talk. We need to help her. We need to help Lynn be as independent as possible. So what we ended up doing is we brought in a hook. And we, and it was a bit, one of those big metal ones like that sticks to the wall. And actually we brought in two, one for her coat and one for her backpack. And so Lynn hung things up in the classroom. But Lynn's cognitive abilities were extremely slow in processing information. And so what we would do is Kathy would hand her her coat in such a way that all Lynn had to do was walk straight forward and hang her coat up. Okay, so Kathy is not hanging her coat up for her. Then Kathy would hand her her backpack in such a way, with the hoop up, would make sure her hands were there, and she would walk straight forward and hang her backpack up. And what we decided to do is, again, because Lynn processed things so slowly, we made sure those hooks, by golly, were right where Lynn's arms were. Because if Lynn had to go up or down, there was a 50-50 chance she was going to miss. So do you see where that was a very simple low-tech AT thing that we brought in, or accommodation we brought in for Lynn to be able to perform the skill more easily and efficiently. She got them both hung up in the least restrictive environment, and she performed it successfully. Do you notice how this question does not say with no personal assistance? Because it's so important for us to understand that the reason you've been hired is that a student needs personal assistance, right? And so, but to try to back out and see what part of the task the student can do as independently as possible. That in that case with Lynn was definitely being able to, and she felt a real sense of accomplishment of being able to do it herself. Okay, and then now let's deal with the fairness issue, because sometimes people will say, well, is it fair that Lynn got to hang it up inside the classroom and not get a locker? Was it fair to make kids who could use the lockers use the lockers? And what we need to understand about the concept of fairness is this. Fairness is not giving everybody the same thing. Fairness is giving each student what they need. All right. Lynn needed the hooks in the classroom. And so if a student would say to me, I had a student who she needed to take breaks. I had a student with Fragile X syndrome who had explosive behaviors. She needed to take frequent breaks. And I had one student say, hey, how come I don't get as many breaks as she does? And he and I stepped out in the hallway to talk, and I said, how many breaks do you think you need? And he goes, well, not as many as her, but could I have another one? And so we worked it out that, well, if you need another one, we'll give it. And you know what? My experience with fairness in my classroom was this. If a student didn't need it, then they did not keep asking for it. And he ended up not continuing to ask for it. Okay, so let's look at a form that you can use. You all have this. What you need to understand with this form is this. This is available on the web. You all have it as part of the packet that was sent out. But so what you need to understand is this, that the name, or it's actually an acronym. The acronym SET stands for student, environments, tasks, and then the fourth one is tools that they need. Now, tools really refers to assistive technology, okay? Right now, what I would challenge you to do for this particular form when we're talking about consideration is don't be thinking about tools. We want to just be considering, is this, what they're being asked to do, where they're being asked to do it, something we need to consider for assistive technology. So let's start with, you'll take a look up at the top. It says student, and then date, and then perspective. Now you're going to describe the current conditions to establish educational needs. And so for perspective, the perspective would be your perspective. And so you would write in their one-on-one paraeducator. You could put your name in there, as long as everybody understands that. I see Richard on my screen, that Richard is the one-on-one. Then that's where then I wouldn't need Richard to say one-on-one paraeducator if I know that Richard is one. But do you see where that's who the perspective is? But so for the date would be the date that you're actually doing this observation, and then, you know, the student's name. Okay. So you're going to first describe the student. Now, I want you to think about, where is the student? Let's maybe go to environments first. For environments, this is where you're going to look at just one specific task the student has to do. And so when we're talking about, and I'll give you a perfect example, this was from my art class. In my art class, we made cards. We did many different card projects. We made cards for, and again, remember how yesterday I talked about Parker Palmer's book, The Courage to Teach, and how he says you teach who you are. I am the daughter, or let me back up. I am the granddaughter of a World War I veteran. My granddad lied and said that he was 18 when he was actually 16, and he fought in World War I in Russia. He never shared any stories with us though, because after he died, my grandmother shared that he never wanted to admit that he had lied to his grandkids. He didn't want us to think that was okay, in spite of the fact that, oh my gosh, he served our country bravely in Russia, fighting in Russia. And so I am the granddaughter of a World War I veteran. I'm the daughter of a Vietnam veteran. My father was an F-4 pilot in the Marines. Okay, my grandfather was in the Army. My father was a Marine. My dad was shot down in his F-4 in Vietnam. The good news is that he survived and came home to us. The bad news is his backseater was killed. And so I hold veterans and their service in high regard in my life. And then of course, I think I shared with you all yesterday that I'm married to an Air Force retired fighter pilot. My husband flew F-15s in the first Gulf War. And so I actually got to experience both being the daughter of, although I'll tell you that in the Vietnam War, it was, my mother made the decision that she just said dad was on a trip. My dad served 2 tours in Vietnam and was shot down. I never had any stress at all as a child because it was never discussed in our house. However, whenever I became an adult and I started watching like documentaries on Vietnam, I can remember calling my dad and saying, Dad, I just watched a documentary that said 50% of F-4 pilots didn't come home. And he was like, my dad was so cute. He was from the South too. And he said, darling, I was in the other 50%. And so, and then I got to experience it as a spouse. So I carry veterans very close to my heart. So I brought that into my classroom, and my class would make 250 cards twice a year for veterans at the VA Medical Center in Oklahoma City. They have a 250 bed hospital there. And what I would do is I would collaborate with English classes to actually write handwritten messages. Now, my students who could write handwritten messages, they did. My student, Michael, who used a word processor, he used the word processor and he wrote it. We printed it out and we put it inside the card. And so my students helped with the messages, but can you imagine how long it would take my students to write 250 messages, personal messages? Wasn't going to happen in a timely manner. And so we needed help, so we collaborated. So the environment was, now the environment of my classroom though was the art center. And so with the cards that we would make Veterans Day cards, and then we would make Valentine's cards. So let's talk about the environment for Valentine's Day. So if I were you and I was observing my student, I'm gonna pick my student who was cortically blind. I think I shared with you all yesterday that she didn't like to touch things. And so what we would do is we had 2 different die cutting machines in my classroom to cut out the hearts that would go on the cards. And one of her jobs was doing that. So the environment would be in an art class, working on, the task would be making hearts for Valentine's cards. The environment would also include how many people were there. And the environment would also include, during art, students would vote on music that we would listen to. If students didn't want to listen to music, then we had headphones that either students would listen to music on the headphones, or students who didn't want to listen to music would put on the sound deafening headphones. And so do you see where you would describe the environment? You are also in that environment. And so you would say that I see Martha is on, that Martha, that in the environment, the student has the support of Martha, the paraeducator, and then also who else is in the room that could potentially be a helper. If you have a student that's in a general ed classroom that has students without disabilities. Okay, and let's talk about that real quickly. I always tend to go off on tangents. Please bear with me, but I think it's an important point to make. Most of you who have been in a special ed classroom for a long time have learned about what's called people first language. This is something that there are very few things I will stick my flag in the ground and make a point on, but people first language is one of them. We know that people first language absolutely respects people first. And so what that means is when you are describing your student or the students that you work with, they are students with disabilities. Since we've been talking, we're now in our third hour of talking, 2 hours last night, we're into 1 hour tonight. You have never heard me say disabled student. You've never heard me say developmentally delayed student. Because what do you hear when you hear that? You hear first that they have a developmental delay, and then second that they're a student. What people first language does is it says switch that. And I know we live in a world where, trust me, I'm married to a military guy. I'm married to a retired fighter pilot. He'll say, oh, that political correctness, it just kills me. This is not political correctness. This is respect for an individual. All right. My brother is my brother first. My students were students first. They were freshmen and sophomores and juniors and seniors first. Then they happen to have a disability second. All right. And so for your students, when you're talking about them, always keep that in mind. Now there is, I will tell you, I reviewed a book for an organization that I think they probably ended up publishing it. It was written by a dad of a child with autism who also is a special ed teacher. As a dad of a child with autism, he referred to his son as autistic. His son, he had an autistic son, and he dared anybody in this book to correct him. If your parent, the parent of your student, says that they have an autistic kid, this isn't our job to correct them, so please don't. However, I encourage you to model people first language, okay? So when you talk about them, you can say how much you enjoy having their student with autism in your classroom, okay? Also though, when you talk about students that don't have disabilities, please don't call them non-disabled students, all right? Because again, they're students first, so they're students without disabilities. Okay, so let me back up. In environments, I always had students without disabilities volunteering in my classroom. If you are working at a high school in a self-contained classroom where your student does not leave the classroom very often, and we need to understand that there's a whole continuum of the least restrictive environment for students. Certainly we want our students in general ed classrooms as much as possible. However, that doesn't meet the least restrictive environment mandate if that isn't where they learn best. My students learn best in a room with only 8 other students, where there was lots of room to move around, where if they needed to take a break, they could. If they needed to go bounce on the chair, they could. I had a swing in my classroom. If they needed to go swing to get some vestibular stimulation, if they needed to have a fidget in their hand that in a general ed classroom would be distracting. Do you see what I'm saying? That I don't want us to ever think self-contained classrooms are the lesser choice, as long as they're the appropriate choice. And so with my students, they only attended self-contained classes except for PE. In PE, we had an adaptive physical ed teacher who taught. She was trained in special education and then also PE. half of her class, we called it a cooperative PE class, half of her class was made up of students without disabilities. The other half was made up of students with disabilities. But in my classroom, I didn't have students without disabilities. So I recruited students to come volunteer. If you work in a high school setting, chances are you know that if a student is on track to graduate, I'm not talking about students who are struggling, that don't have aren't diagnosed with a disability, but that have like dropped out or come back or flunked classes. But students who are on their way to graduating, by the time they become a senior, they really only need 1 or 2 classes to graduate. The rest of the classes are extra. And so they could come into my classroom or be assigned to my classroom for 1 class per day. And they loved it because guess what? I didn't give homework to them. And they got to hang out and make relationships with my students. And so in environments, if you have peer tutors is what I called them, or students without disabilities, that's what you would describe in the environment, okay? Basically what you wanna do in this particular document is you want to give, because if you are in a general ed classroom with your student with disabilities and you're going to use this to talk about what a student needs and the general ed teacher hasn't been in that classroom, you need to give a really good description of what's going on in that classroom. How many students are in the classroom? Are they sitting at tables? Are they sitting at desks? Are they, is there flexible seating and your student is able to sit on a wobble chair? Do you see what I'm saying? What does the environment look like? Now, let's back up to student. When we look at the student column, what we want you to do there is we want you to describe the student in that environment. So what I want you to think about right now is this. Are there environments, if you switch classes with your students, are there environments where they do better, where needs are met? If they go to music, do they love music because they get to stand up the whole time, or they get to bang on drums or shake tambourines and they don't have a problem with it? Or the exact opposite, do they go to music and really have some challenges in music because maybe it's too loud? I had a student who, his mom really wanted him in choir at the high school. And we had a great high school choir teacher who was more than willing to welcome the student in the class, but realized that my student who had severe delays, the choir teacher was only going to let him come into the general choir class. Well, his general choir class, are you ready, had 85 students in it. Okay, so my student is going from a classroom with 8 students to a classroom with 85 students. And so his behavior in that environment, so the environment we would then describe as no chairs, 85 students, very loud, me as a para, 1 teacher, maybe an assistant choir director, very large room, very high ceiling. That's what I would be describing in the environment. For the student, this is where I would describe the student completely shut down when he first went into choir. Now remember, mom asked me to put him in choir, so I did. Sent his para educator with him. I didn't go though, and that's where we did exactly this form. I asked my para to fill out a set form to tell me what's going on, so that, because what you need to realize is you could very easily tell the teacher this, couldn't you? You could have the conversation and tell the teacher this. What the teacher needs for the IEP is documentation. You all have accepted a position in a profession that stakes its claim on documentation, all right? You all are such an important part of the documentation process, all right? So with this student in choir, basically what, the para wrote was, the student is tremendously shy, is socially awkward. There were a couple of friends in the environment that he knew, friends without disabilities that he knew. But once they started singing, oh, and 2, okay, let's switch to the task part. In choir, you're required to, and this was, okay, even though it was back 11 years ago that I taught in the high school, we had smart boards. Some classrooms had smart boards. The choir room had a smart board, and it was pretty high up on the wall, and the choir director would post the music, what the student was supposed to sing, up on the wall. Okay, everybody, you know what? My student didn't know how to read. He did not have, he could recognize his name in print. Okay, he could recognize some environmental prints like McDonald's, like stop, but he certainly could not read a song on the board. Okay, so the task was, number one, he would have to, read the song. Number two, he would have to stand on a riser. Okay, my student was average height for a high schooler, so he was on like the second riser up. He did not like that. So the task was he had to stand on a second riser. The student part was he was very uncomfortable standing on the riser. Do you see what I'm saying? That's where you would divide out. What's the student doing and what is the task asking him to do? Okay, it involved also standing very close to, there were 85 students in this classroom on a riser. There were students behind him, in front of him, and next to him. The student, demonstrated behaviors of being tremendously uncomfortable in a crowded situation. Do you see all of the different things you could put into this document? And then bottom line, I hate to say this because it breaks my heart, but when after the first day, when he just got so overwhelmed, he then on the second day, he walked into the classroom, and when the choir director said, take your positions, he went straight, the choir director in their room, they had a closet that kept like all of the, choir books and teacher stuff. My student went and hid in the closet. That's what he did the second day that she was in taking data. Okay, so what this did is it absolutely positively gave me documentation to go back to the mom and say, okay, how important is it for him to stay in choir? And for the mother, it really was important, and for this reason. First of all, we remember how, you're talking to someone who has a foot in both camps. I am a special ed trained teacher, and I am also a family member, okay? We need to understand that parents bring things to our table. Those of you who are working in early childhood, which I saw several, and in elementary school, realize that you are all primarily working with students with some pretty significant developmental delays. You need to realize that parents bring a great deal of pain and sense of loss to you in the schools. Realize that kind of the nice part at the high school level was that my parents of my students with disabilities understood their kids had delays. I didn't have to have those conversations with them. However, for this particular student, he had a sibling who had gone through school 2 years earlier. She had been not just in general choir, she had been in show choir. She had been like the best of the best in choir, okay? The mom wanted him to have the same opportunities she had. So can you see where that's where we as educational professionals need to go? How can I make this work for you? Okay. And so what I did is, honestly, our next step, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, but our next step was to start trialing some tools to help him. One of them was sound reducing headphones. Another was getting the music taped, bringing it into our classroom, playing it during art, and having everybody in our room sing. Oh, and I'll also back up and say, his older sibling would sing at home, and my student would sing with her at home when it was just the two of them. They would sing together. So can you see where the mom was saying, he has the ability to sing. Now will you help him sing in school in the general choir? How can we say no to that? And that's where assistive technology comes in to help us. And that's where you all come in to help us with using something like the SET form. Student environment tasks, and then the second T is tools, okay? So I'm going to pause really quickly and look at the chat. Are there any questions that you can think of right now about the set that you would want to ask?
Dr. Gretchen?
Yes.
Hi, just wanted to put in the chat earlier, wishing that there were funding for assistive technology. So just wanted to bring up that this form actually justifies all that. So you don't need to worry really about funding if it's justified and you've been gathering data for a student who is in need of a particular assistive technology. The school must procure it if it's in the IEP.
Absolutely, Michelle. And that is such a good point. And in fact, what I challenge you all to do is to think about this. I agree. I saw a meme a long time ago that said, wouldn't we live in a wonderful world where the Air Force would have to have a bake sale to buy a bomber and schools had all the money they needed? However, that's not the reality that we live in. What we need to understand about the federal law is this. Rita, if you need to take a break, please take a quick break and come right back. Since we just have 2 hours together, I'm going to keep going, so please bear with me. But if you need to take a quick break, please do. It's a great question about funding. What we need to understand is that the federal law requires that if assistive technology is deemed necessary, and I want you to hold that thought because I'm going to go back to it. But if it is deemed necessary, that it must be provided in what is called a timely manner. And what they mean by that is a timely manner is the same manner that students without disabilities get their books. So if there are books, we need to be getting them assistive technology. Now, what Michelle just pointed out is the key factor. You all are an absolute positive, important role. You have an important role in the process of getting funding, because this is documentation to say the student needs sound reducing headphones to be able to participate in as fully as possible with less personal assistance in the choir room. Okay, and so this is the documentation that says, now the next one, tomorrow night, we're going to talk about how you all are going to help actually assess the tools and how you're going to document that. And so that will be the final step. This is the first step to documentation, is the consideration factor. Because you know what, honestly, let's back out from him having problems with the noise in the room. Let's say that you do the set, he's having problems there, you do the set because you're considering, is there something that we can do for him in the choir room to keep him in the choir room? And so let's do a set to see. Let's describe the student's behavior in there. Let's describe the environments. Let's describe the tasks, just as I've said. Okay, well, let's take away the fact. Let's say that the noise didn't bother. Okay, however, the closeness on the rafters did. And so did the fact that he has to read music. He has to read the words up on the screen. What are some things that we could do? Let's put it in the chat. Let me ask you all, what are some accommodations we could do to help him deal with how close he has to be with everybody on the rafters? What could you do? What would you recommend that we do? Play a game, absolutely. Change what he's having to do up there so that way maybe he would get used to being around people. Gentlemen, thank you. That is absolutely. Sports, because in sports, absolutely, that they would have to do that. And the choir director could even kind of bring that in. Jesse, I agree, make it a game up there so that way, let's have him have some experiences on the rafters, because he's never had them before, has he? You guys are fabulous. Those are great ideas. We could watch a movie, have them stand up on the rafter and watch a movie. Open up, absolutely. Could we separate people out a little bit, Linda, to bring in the arts, do you see where, because the thing is, we want him on the rafters. What could he be doing? Jenna Lynn, absolutely. Having an icebreaker, maybe having him, Jenna Lynn, what a great idea. Getting to know the people that are standing in front of him, the people that are standing behind him, and the people that are standing next to him. And to maybe you as a paraeducator would be there to help with the icebreaker, to help them get to know him and to appreciate who he is as a teenager, and to maybe even share with them, you know, he's kind of introducing, absolutely, you know, to introduce him to, because you know what, sometimes in a group of 85, the choir director doesn't have time to say, everybody get to know each other. Jerome, socializing, isn't that such a key part of what our students struggle with? Have a variety of activities, Richard, I agree, and then see what catches his interest and calms him down while he's up there. Make him or her open-minded with a person and memorize the people, absolutely. Oh, Richard, what a great idea. Place people, that gives me goosebumps. Place people he knows around him. And then at juror number 8, you guys are fabulous. To look for, you know, we need to take some time for interactions. Do you see where this is your role? To then say to the teacher, extend time for students with fine motor limitations. Absolutely. Richard, to sign. And you know what I would challenge is to not just sign with him, but teach everyone else how to sign, right? So how fabulous. Absolutely. And so wonderful ideas to teach him to figure out how to be more comfortable, doing a guess who's who, absolutely, and having him be part of it. Okay, so those are absolutely great ideas. You'll notice that on your set, Shina, I hope I'm saying your name right, or Sheena, maybe type in how do I say your name phonetically. You know, it's always so important that we say people's names correctly. But so can you see where encouragement, yes, Sheena, thank you so much. Can you see where you could take this set scaffold back to your cooperating teacher and say, if it's just the rafter problem, we don't really need assistive technology. Do you see where this is such a key part of your role, is to then go back and say, but here are some ideas for how we can help keep him in. It gives me goosebumps, you all. Absolutely fabulous. And you know what I love about your ideas? What I absolutely positively love about your ideas is not one of you said, separate him out from the choir. Not one of you said, take him off the rafter, right? Now, that might be what we have to do, right? But let's try not to. Let's start with keeping him where his peers are. You guys are fabulous. So, okay, so now I'm going to challenge you. How do we teach him the song if he can't read? What do you think? Pop it in the chat room. How can we teach him the song if he doesn't read? Because, you know, choirs do shows, right? The whole point of general choir is once a semester, they're going to do a show. So they're going to have a set list of dance or act it out, gentlemen. Absolutely. Sing it to him. Guess what, y'all? Y'all are going to start singing. Sign language. Absolutely, Flora. At ASL, word by word or point by point. Maria, absolutely. To teach him where the points are. Humming. Absolutely. To learn the song. Let him or her hear the music and hear it a lot. Patrick, I love it too. Humming. Audio with headphones, Richard. Absolutely. Physical prompts. Gentlemen, I agree that you could write it out. Can you see where you guys are fabulous? Keep signing it. Absolutely, Selena, because we know that there's a connection between movement and learning the words. Pictures, absolutely, that you could work and I love you. Alexis, you are fabulous. Juror number 8. You're going to be a star. And that's what we're going to tell him or her, to dance it out and to do a sing along. So can you see where your job is so important? Because you're with them in music. As a special ed teacher, Linda, I agree about the humming. I think that will teach the student absolutely the music that goes along with it. And do you see where by filling out the set, your teacher is saying, is there assistive technology we need? This is the consideration form. This is saying, Melinda, I agree to put pictures with it. And so what we would want to do though is now we take it back to the special ed teacher you would bring it back to me and say, hey, Gretchen, listen, here are some ideas that I have for helping him or her learn the songs. And I might need to spend some time in your class doing it. Remember how I said in art class, what we would do is we would bring the songs into art class and we would play them in art. Remember how I said we would vote on songs? Well, sometimes I would help pad the vote so that way we would listen to the choir songs that he was singing. What we would also do is I found, on the web, I would Google the song, and sometimes I could either, maybe back into YouTube or find a different way to play the song on the smartboard so that way it would reinforce the song. You know what else I did? And this is something that, again, remember how yesterday I said you need to be talking with your special ed teacher, the teacher of record, the one who handles the IEP, about your role with communication with the parents. And I'll tell you that as a special ed teacher, it was an individual decision that I made as to whether the paraeducator was the one who would communicate with the parent on a daily basis or whether I would. And what that really came down to, honestly, for my decision is this. Number one, the buck stops on the special ed teacher's desk, okay? They're responsible for making sure goals and objectives are met. They're responsible for answering for any problems that occur in the classroom. Paraeducators, however, you all play such an important role, and it depends on the relationship with the parents. My student, remember yesterday that I said, relied on the paraeducator for everything. She had startle-induced seizures. She had the meaningful movement with that one index finger. That para came with that student from middle school. And so she had a long-standing relationship with the parent. And so I would say to her, tell the parent this. And she had a daily notebook that went in the teacher folder that she would write to the parent. And so in his case, what I did is this student's mother would meet him outside and pick him up. She wouldn't come in the building, which was fabulous. I worked really hard on my parents never bringing their kids in the building because we would meet the buses. The paraeducators would meet the buses. I was always in my classroom because I wanted to greet the students when they came in, but the paraeducators always met the buses. So parents could pull up and, I would assign paras to this para is in charge of this para is in charge of that student. And so she would go out and meet the student and his parent. And so I shared with her that, hey, listen, give the parent the names of the songs that he needs to sing. And you know what? The parent was so involved, and I hope you have involved parents. And if you don't, it's okay, because you know what? You're in charge of your four walls at school, and you give the student as much as you can there. But this parent, oh my gosh, got the sister involved. The sister was in college, but she lived in the local area. She would still sing with the student. The whole family was involved. And you know what? He ended up being able to sing at the concert. And he did really well. Now, the challenge was, I will share with you, that we didn't do another set form because we worked it all out without assistive technology. However, what we ended up having was a challenge because in the choir room, there weren't stage lights. And so he got a little nervous up on the stage. But you know what? Just like you all said, he, by that point, was very comfortable on the rafters, and his friends helped him. I'm not sure how loud he sang, but by golly, he participated. And so do you see where the set, so for those of you asking about funding, right now, what we're doing is we're simply considering, but you brought up a key point of funding, and what do we do to get the funding? Now, I'll also tell you though, that again, on this set form, you're identifying you need to have, if you identify now there's a tool we need, then we then evaluate the tool and we trial it through borrowing it through GSAT. Once you have all that documentation, then you have tremendous strength behind the request to the special ed director to get the assistive tech device in a timely manner. I'll also tell you though that I wasn't a very patient person, and so I became a grant writer. And at some point, I think I'll come back to GSAT and do a funding workshop. And I encourage you to pay attention to whenever there are workshops given, that para-educators can write grant applications as well as their teachers. In fact, they can write them for their teachers in some cases. So there's no reason why we can't get assistive technology into the classroom. None whatsoever. Bruce, all good techniques of communication. Doesn't life come down to that? You know, that it all comes down to being able to communicate with the choir teacher, with you, with the special ed teacher, with the friends, with and then with the parents. And I'm telling you, the parents of kiddos that we have strong communication with are the happiest parents. They really are, because they know that we're committed to and we're listening to them. Instead of saying after the second day, because it broke my heart that he ran into the closet and shut the door. He stayed in there the whole period. He would not leave till all the kids left. And that wasn't until the end of the hour. So he was in that closet for an hour with the paraeducator talking to him through the door quietly, and texting me to say, what do I do? And you know, me texting back saying, do you need me there? And she's like, no, you'll make it even worse. Okay, then I'm not coming. I'll just wait. Make sure, and I just kept saying, make sure he's safe, make sure he's not too hot, make sure he has air in there. Then that's where I said, okay, now we need to do a set to figure out what's going on. Let's go in there and see and have you fill this out. And so it's a fabulous form, and I want you all to put it in a notebook and consider using it. And if your teacher hasn't heard about it because they didn't take my workshop in the spring, show it to them and say, hey, listen, if you ever need documentation on something going on, either in your classroom where, you know, to be honest, while I had, you know, between 8 and 11 students in my classroom, we all know, you know, when you're up to your elbows in alligators, it's really hard to know who's having it, you know, who's struggling if you don't have strong paraeducators to help. So this form could be used in the special ed classroom. It can also definitely be used out in the general ed classrooms or settings. Remember that this could even be used in the cafeteria. All right, so now let's take a look at some errors, some things that go wrong. Common errors in assistive technology consideration. First, it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, that one of our biggest challenges is that we only consider assistive technology for students with severe disabilities only, that we never do a set for a student who doesn't have a severe disability. You all are probably not going to be working with students with learning disabilities. However, you might have a student with a learning disability in your classroom that you notice is struggling. I'm not saying that you're responsible for doing the set scaffold form. I'm not saying you need to help, you know, take data on that student because you're a one-on-one with your student. However, can you see where you could then take that information to that student's special ed teacher to say, I think that you might want to consider some type of assistive technology to help that student. For the same reasons, remember we go back to the questions, that is the student able to participate in the activity and demonstrate their actual abilities, right? And if you feel like that student is really a bright student, but might need assistive technology to help them be able to write a paper, maybe they need speech to text to be able to do that in an English class if writing a paper is the assignment. And you hear, because you all are, oh my gosh, you're the eyes and ears of us. You know, you hear a student say, yeah, she wanted 3 pages, but I could only do 1. Okay, and you know that student because not a need to know, you don't know the specifics, but you are aware that that student has some form of a learning disability. That might be a conversation to then hand off to a teacher. The second thing is that no one on the IEP team is knowledgeable regarding assistive technology. Okay, this is where I would challenge you all, if you have a mirror close by, or if you have your phone, turn it on photo and turn it around, and I want you to look at yourself. Because you now are a member of the IEP team with knowledge regarding assistive technology. At the end of this week, you will finish this course not knowing it all, because you know what, I still don't know it all. Remember how I said I spent a couple of hours looking at vision devices today? And in the world of technology, we will never know it all. right? Because new stuff comes out. You know what was funny was I went on to our list that my staff at Able Tech were putting together a list of what we're going to order from this year. We have a New Year's budget. And one of our people that is not a vision specialist put something on there that I was going to put on there. So what we need to realize is that hopefully you're working on a team where other people know things too. Because I firmly believe, I have a lot of sayings in my life, and I firmly believe in the saying of none of us are as smart as all of us. And so hopefully on your IEP team, your teacher does have some knowledge of assistive technology, but if not, here's my challenge, then you need to bring it up and to ask the questions and ask them respectfully, not do it in the format of, hey, I learned something that you don't know, because there'll always be something they know that you don't know. And so we need to keep a respectful relationship with everyone. You all talked about that, you know, in your considerations, you know, of working with colleagues. We all need to work respectfully with each other. But if you know something that can benefit a student, then you need to share it respectfully. The next common error that is identified, and these are all identified through the quality indicators of assistive technology. The next one is that the team does not use a consistent process based on data about the student, the environments, and the tasks to make the decisions. Okay, let me back up the slide. You know what? You all now have a consistent process to consider assistive technology, don't you? So you're not going to make that error when you go into your classroom. If your teacher says, hey, do you think there's something that they need that might help them? This is where you say, you know what? I have a form we can use to actually kind of document that. Okay. And then you share it. And trust me when I say, your teacher's going to say, oh my gosh, this is fabulous. Thank you so much for bringing it to my attention. All right. Continued. Another error is that consideration of assistive technology is limited to those items that are familiar to team members or are available in the district. Okay, your district might have an assistive technology inventory list. I hope it does. If it doesn't, your teacher might have a closet full. I had my own AT inventory closet for stuff that we weren't using, but was there in the classroom. I loaned it out a lot. I had a sign in, sign out log though, because I wanted to keep track, because those were items that, okay, they belong to the district, but because they've been either bought by the district or bought through grants for me, but they were ones that I might have a student that would need them. And so I could hunt them down if I needed to. But a key thing is, let's go to the first part of the statement, in that an error is that assistive technology is limited to those items that are familiar to team members. And so now I'm going to tell you another quick story. The last class on Friday, I'm going to have so much fun telling you about some real life experiences. I'm going to share pictures with permission from the parents and share videos with permission from the parents. What happened though was, in an elementary school, we had students transfer from our child development lab at OSU into a local elementary school. So a student goes in first. The first student out of the chute goes in, and he is using an iPad with the LAMP app, the Language Acquisition for Motor Planning app on it. All the para educators got trained on the LAMP. We then identified in the fourth year, it was a 4-year study. In the fourth year of the study, we identified another student, an 8-year-old who just moved into the school, who had very limited communication abilities. We identified that he was using, remember the Go Talk 9? He was using the Go Talk 9. That's what he came in with from his previous school. Para educators were really frustrated with it. They felt it was really cumbersome, and they didn't like having to keep switching the papers. And so they asked, could we not trial an iPad? You ready? With the LAMP app. Well, our speech and language pathologist recommended, I don't even remember the name of the app, but it was a different communication app that had some differences to it. She thought that better fit the student's need. Guess what the para educator said? Absolutely not. We are not going to do that. We've learned the LAMP app and that's all we want to use. Now, so we trialed the LAMP app with him, and to be very honest, he did very successfully with it. If he hadn't, I would have pushed back firmly, because that's an error. Just because you're familiar with it doesn't mean you can't learn something new. So please, kind of like what we said in the beginning with the consideration, and that's why I love you all so much, is that you said our minds need to be open. Team members fail to consider access to the curriculum and IEP goals in determining if assistive technology is required for the student to receive what we call is FAPE. Realize that FAPE stands for free and appropriate public education. Okay, we are mandated by the
Free,
IDEA.
appropriate public education.
Very good, absolutely. Thank you for that. It is free, appropriate public education. And so what that says
Free,
is
appropriate
that
FAPE.
if FAPE, yep, we call it FAPE, free and appropriate public education. And so what that means is it's at no cost to the parents, but it must be appropriate. You need to realize that there's been a Supreme Court case as recent as 2017 to argue about what is appropriate. Okay, that if, okay, you know, remember how I said, you know, if a student can use pictures to communicate, is that appropriate? Well, yes, if the student isn't able to use a speech generated device. But if they're able to push a button and have it actually say what they want it to say, then pictures are a good backup, but they better not be the only thing we're doing. Do you see what I'm saying? For example, speech to text on a computer. You all could be the transcriptionist. You could write down what the student's saying, or you could type it in for them, right? That's not necessarily appropriate because you're not always going to be there. Let's give them a device or software that they can always have available to them. Then finally, if assistive technology is not needed, the team fails to document the basis of its decisions. Let's go back to my choir student. If he didn't need anything and we failed to document it, then the parent could come back and say, how do you know he didn't need anything? Do you see what I'm saying? We live and die by documentation, folks. You will always have a parent who will say, show me the documents. Show me how you know my student doesn't need assistive technology to keep him in choir. Okay, so if it is not needed, we still have to document why it's not needed. Okay, so that set form is so very, very important. Okay, real quickly, let's talk about your make and take for tonight. Hopefully you all found the bags. If you didn't, go hunt them down because somebody's got some good stuff that you need. This is a writing low-tech assistive technology device. Now, it's a simple pencil. Okay, now, and I know, you know what's funny is that I mentioned to our make and take person at Oklahoma Able Tech, because you'll notice on mine, it talks about an O-ring, which is just this little itty bitty ring. She said that she has to hunt down Home Depots for them. I know you all got rubber bands, which are just fine. So you put a rubber band on the pencil, okay? And then inside your baggie, you have several hex nuts. I sound really informed by saying hex nuts. Okay, so then you decide how many, and the thing is, this is where you work with your student. Now, if your student isn't able to tell you, then this is where you as the paraeducator watch. Okay, so I'm gonna guess that my student might need 3 hex nuts on their pencil. Now, along with this though, the question then becomes, where do we put the hex nuts? Do we put them on the top so that it's heavy towards the back? Do we put them in the middle so it's heavy? Because if you're doing this with me, you're feeling the difference, the sensory difference in the weight of the pencil. Okay, and then finally, would they need it down near the end and they actually hold on to it? So it weights the pencil down, but then they can hold on to it. Now, I know there are at least a couple of you that are thinking, I know what my kid would do with those hex nuts, right? And one of them is not a nice thing. What you need to teach is this is not a toy. Here's the procedure. The procedure is the hex nuts stay on the pencil, and if they come off, we're going to put them back on one more time. And if they come off a second time, then we're going to need to look for a different assistive technology pencil. Okay, because in my classroom, I only ever had 2 rules. The 2 rules were be kind and be safe. If you're taking the hex nuts off this and you're throwing them, you're twirling them, you're doing whatever, that's not safe. Okay. Now I will tell you that I did eventually add a 3rd rule, and the 3rd rule was it was be kind, be safe, and the 3rd one was be learning. That your job in school is to be learning. So if you're playing with the hex nuts, you're not learning. The goal right now is to be doing writing. Okay. And so this is a weighted pencil. Sometime now, my student that moved on to a word processor, we tried weighted pencils. We tried every weighted pencil there was. It didn't help him. Okay, so I'm not saying this is for everyone, but this is another tool in your toolbox. So, all right, we have like 13 minutes left. So I'm going to turn it over to the chat, and I'm just going to take some notes. Could you please write down some questions you'd want to ask me, or some concerns you have that you'd want to run by me, and I'll try to maybe do a couple. Maybe Leah, if I can ask you to also be my scribe to kind of catch some ideas and email them to me if I miss it, because as they write them in, I might start talking about it. But we have just a couple of minutes before. Putting clay around the top. What a great idea, Trisha, to put clay around the top. That's a great sensory experience, and rubber bands on the bottom. What is the brown circle things for? The brown circle things are to keep the hex nuts on, Jenna Lynn. I think the brown circle things are like the rubber bands, yes? Are they like my O-rings? Maybe Michelle or Leah can come in because they're the ones who put the make and takes together for you all. Other questions? And they can.
I think Dr. Coley, I think they were referring to the photo on that's on the screen.
Oh, I see the brown circle.
Yeah.
I think it's a hex nut. I think it's just a brown hex nut.
Okay.
So.
Oh, no. No, just UOG.
Yep. I don't think that maybe they ran out of silver ones. Or maybe there was a sale on the brown ones, because if there's a sale, we're going for that if it'll work. So other questions or thoughts tonight? Big or little questions?
Well, I think those are felt pads. Brown circles are from yesterday's make and take. Those are the felt pads.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yes.
yes. The brown. Leah, that's what they are. Yes. I have them. Oh, I think I've already put mine away. Yes, those were the brown felt pads that went underneath the keyboard wrist guards. There you go, gentlemen. Okay, so yeah, those go on that. Questions regarding. Yes, can you think, that's a great direct question, Michelle. Let me ask you all, what assistive technology have you ever used in your classrooms with your students? Sometimes metal can be uncomfortable, and I agree. Are there any alternate rubber bands? I think that this is where maybe to use the clay, this is where we start. This is where you, again, none of us are as smart as all of us. What else could you put on there? Pencil grips, Chastity, absolutely. Pencil grips are something that, that not just students with disabilities use. Some of us even might use pencil grips to help. And then you can figure out a way. A tennis ball, absolutely. In fact, Oklahoma Able Tech is now working on, we have a 3D printer, and they're making a round thing that it's like a tennis ball, but they're making it out of a 3D printer. So the rule of thumb is to allow the student to reach their fullest potential before moving on to the backup AT. You want to try everything that you have in your classroom, that any strategies that you're using that are simple before you start thinking what assistive technology is out there. The thing is, you want them to be participating in the task the teacher has set. So if they're in a general ed classroom and the teacher is saying it's time to do board work, and the student is now having a problem taking the board from there and taking the information from the board and then putting it onto paper, then that's where you want them to reach their fullest potential of doing it. Melinda, I had to purchase clay out of pocket, or I was given a tube by my student's therapist. You know, Melinda, my husband in my second year of teaching here in Oklahoma posted a poster that had made the newspaper locally that said, "My husband's salary supports my teaching habit." Because sometimes that's what we have to do. I would encourage you to work with your special ed teacher so you don't have to. Richard, what is a good way of AT to help a student that's on medication that makes them unable to stay awake or focused if the student is always drowsy? This is where, Richard, this is where you need to start documenting. How are they in the morning? How are they, you know, the question I would ask is, are they being given the medication at home? So they're coming to school medicated, or are they taking the medication at school? And then you see a change. Do you see what I'm saying, Richard? You are a vital part of that decision-making on medication. And I have had, you need to work with your school nurse. I hope you have one. If you don't, work with your district nurse. If you don't, get with your special ed director to say, I need somebody medical to help us make some decisions about medication. I had a student, remember I told you all that, you know, one of my first teaching experiences as a very unexperienced teacher was teaching students with oppositional defiance disorder. I had a student who came into school just as you've just described, and the parent would medicate before they came to school, and then they would sleep all day. I mean, and I'm not talking sleep. I am talking, you know, sleep, the sleep of the dead. He would not wake up for anything. He would sleep through lunch and then wake up about 2 o'clock and be starving. And so I worked with my school nurse. We held a meeting and I had a fabulous paraeducator. Her name is Vonnie. Gosh, she was the funniest. She was the best person. She's the only reason that I survived that year. And so Bonnie and I asked Bonnie to help me take documentation on, we would time how long he was, you know, describe, you're saying, you know, unable to stay awake or focus. This is where you need to be documenting, you know, what does difficulty staying awake look like for him? Is he dropping his head? Are his eyes, oh, I'm assuming it's a he, now I see it's maybe not. He or she is, are his eyelids fluttering? Is the student unable to follow teacher directions? Is the student unable to follow your directions if you're sitting right next to them? That's what you need to document. Give it to your teacher, and then ask if we can have a meeting to talk. Hot glue gun around the pencil, Bobby, I love it. Straps, absolutely. And clay are helpful with students, and stress, they can squish. Oh, how many Richards are in this meeting? Too many, I think, but that's wonderful. I'm glad you all are here. Jenna Lynn's actually going to count them. You guys are a fabulous group. Linda, give manipulative materials to get ready on writing. Absolutely, because if you think about it, if they're having problems with writing, what they're really having problems with are fine motor skills, aren't they? And so writing is not the only thing we can give them to work on it. We can give them fidgets to work on fine motor skills. We can give them boards of, you know, manipulatives that they can work on. Manipulatives are fabulous. And in fact, if you're having a student who's having trouble with writing, that is one of the key things that you need to be doing. It's kind of like what we said with the singing. He was having problems on the, oh, Zach, you need oxygen. I'm sorry. We're almost done, Zach. We've got 5 minutes. You know, he was having trouble on the rafters.
Smoke your finger.
That we said, let's give him some games and things to do. Same things with writing. Linda, absolutely. Have them practice on fine motor skills. And then you'll see that maybe you'll see that there's a difference. My student who used the word processor, he could not tie his shoes to save his life, and he could not zip up his coat to save his life. He could do the zip if the zip part of it, the holding part, was large, but if the zipper was already started for him. Rosita, I've never attended my student's IP. My parent has requested that I sit in the meetings, but I was never included. What is the appropriate approach, or who do I inquire with in order to join the IP? Honestly, if the parent has requested that you sit in on the meetings, obviously the parent has told you. I'm assuming that. So what I would do is, as the paraeducator, just politely say to the parent that she or he needs to request that you be there. Okay, and so she will get an invitation, and on the invitation to the IEP meeting, it will list who's going to be there. And if your name is not on there, then she needs to give it back to the special ed teacher and say that she wants it on there. That will happen. that will make it happen, and hopefully, you know, take out you as the middleman of the conversation. Ryan, I'm sorry that you've never been in an IEP. Hopefully you will be. Often our input is disregarded in the meetings, and Elba, I'm really sorry that that is. I think I encourage you to consider, yes, Misa, I hope I'm saying your name right, Misa, that invite your, or Bruce, invite yourself respectfully, and that the parent had to request it. If your input is disregarded, let's go back to one of the quiet things is that you need to be attending professional development trainings you all now have. And so now you have a form. What I would maybe even suggest is if your cooperating teacher does not say, oh my gosh, yes, that's wonderful, I would just do it anyway and keep a log of it, and then maybe present it to the teacher before the IEP meeting to say, I have all this documentation, and then here are my notes based on the documentation, you know, for things that I would recommend. I think one of the very unfortunate parts of a hierarchical system like education is that if you don't have a degree, then maybe you can be disregarded. And see, I disagree with that. I think you all can pick that up based on just the 2 hours you've spent with me. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. And now I'm giving you tools to be able to present documentation in a professional manner that will help them be able to make decisions and to get funding for their assistive technology. Bruce, to know the IEP schedule and request to be present. Nothing is wrong with that. I agree too. Ryan, what if the parent requested us to stay with their child, but the principal wanted us to be transferred somewhere else? Oh, Ryan, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, again, principals are the ones who make the decisions. What I would say is that if the parent feels that strongly, the parent needs to make a case with administration that, you know, I always say, you know, that needs to be run up somebody else's flagpole. That absolutely, you need to encourage the parent to become an advocate for their child, and they always will need to be an advocate for their child. And then, you know, on the sibling side, I will tell you, I still have to be an advocate for my brother. And so that I'll tell you that if a parent or the guardian makes a request, pretty much school systems will listen, as long as it's done respectfully and with documentation to say, you know, that Ryan, that you have developed a relationship with the student and the parent wants it to continue into the new setting, or to stay with the student in that setting. Linda, performance will make you stay at the school where you're at. Absolutely, it does. I agree completely. Are you, you know, and it kind of goes back to, you know, what is considered for you, that question at the beginning, you know, the time that you have to work. You know, do you show up on time? Are you willing to, you know, meet the expectations of the job that you're at? Do you have a positive attitude? You yourself is included in today's technology. You do. I'm telling you all, if you go into school and you say, let me share this weighted pencil thing with you, this is a really cool idea that might help some of our students. Very rarely will a teacher go, I don't want to know that. You know, very rarely will a teacher say, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought that maybe we should be doing X with assistive technology. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't know that GSAT has an AT inventory that I can look through. Do you see what I'm saying? So lots and lots of thoughts. All right, everyone, it is 7 o'clock. Thank you all so much for tonight. You all give me so much energy and so much hope for the future of education. And so with that, I will ask Leah or Michelle if we have any last thoughts. Otherwise, we'll go to our farewells and we'll say, see you tomorrow morning for you, tomorrow night for me at the same time.
Thank you for a very lively presentation today, Dr. Gretchen. Lots of fun, and we're excited for tomorrow. Ms. Trish, did you have any few last words? Lay?
Yes, no, again, thank you, Dr. Coley, Peters, Michelle, and Leah, and everybody behind the scenes, right? And thank you for all our participants today, right? Actively engaged, we love it, and we appreciate your participation. Do not forget, there's a link again on the chat. Please be sure to sign in. I know you're probably tired of hearing this, but I just want to make sure you're accounted for.
I just
Thank
want to
you.
know where, man.
It's on there, so you just have to scroll.
When Neil is here, I love it. Your engagement is unbelievable. Neil, it always is.
Thank you.
So, all right, very good, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow night for an even more informative. I'm going to give you even more stuff tomorrow for your resource files. So thank you, Michelle and Leah.
Bye,
And Trisha,
friends.
I will also always remember to kick it to you as well.
So end up
I'm gonna
closing it. Yeah.
All right, we'll see you all tomorrow.
Linda, where you at? Linda.